Welcome to The Sound, KQAL-FM's weekly behind-the-scenes look at Midwestern-made music. From writing and recording to distribution and promotion, The Sound is your source for new releases and exclusive interviews from Midwestern artists. Support for The Sound is made possible by a grant from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Rolling.
Today on The Sound, we're joined by local artist John Paulson as he talks about his new album, The Refuge Project. Starting his music career in Rochester, Minnesota, John Paulson has made a career for himself teaching music at St. Mary's University and teaching jazz studies at Winona State University. He has performed with the Cab Calloway Orchestra, Mel Torme, Andy Williams, Bob Hope, The Temptations, and Johnny Mathis, to name a few. And we actually have him in here in the studio with us. How are you doing today, John?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Giovanni.
Well, let's just start things off with the music. Here is Blues for SC on the new album, The Refuge Project by John Paulson. And that was Blues for SC on the new album, The Refuge Project by John Paulson, who we have in here in the studio.
Yes, live.
Yeah, live. My first question for this is, what does SC stand for in that song?
As South Carolina.
Really? So I was right.
Yeah.
We were debating on this, and one of my friends here said maybe it stands for Stephen Colbert.
No.
But yeah, I was right. So Blues for South Carolina. That's great.
Unfortunately, it was inspired by one of the earlier on mass shootings that happened, a big one there, and I kind of quickly whipped out the melody and then developed it later into the big band chart.
Really? How did that melody come to you after that event?
Oh, a lot of times it's just me practicing, and I goof around a little bit on the horn and come up with something. Sometimes I'll write down a few bars and then develop it later.
Really? Well, let's go back to your origins. What was your start in music like? How did you start out?
That's probably the funniest part. My first experience with studying music was organ lessons that we had. We had a Hammond M organ in our house. My mother played a little bit, so they got me going on lessons, and I had such a hard time that I actually cried during my lessons, and I'm kind of afraid that I was going to short the organ out. And so then fifth grade comes along, and you have a chance to play band instruments, and I picked the saxophone, and that was it. I still get excited every time I open it up and see all the different keys and everything. And that's 60 years ago.
What made you choose the saxophone?
The most popular guy in the class chose the saxophone right before me. And he's a Mayo Clinic doctor now, and he comes to gigs when I play over there and tells everybody that he's the reason why I play the saxophone.
Well, you'll love this little bit of trivia. Did you know that this past Monday was actually National Saxophone Day?
Oh, I know. It was Adolph Sax's birthday, Monday.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I've got that on my calendar. It comes up yearly.
Yeah, when we were doing this show, I just love the connection. I'm like, we're celebrating all week here at KQAL.
All right.
But man, that's just amazing to hear. Why don't we get back? Why don't we get into your next song? This will be the namesake of the album. Actually, this is Refuge, from the new song "The Refuge Project" by John Paulson.
And so we cried 1,000 tears and hid away with all our fears. Our one escape was nature's gate, some shelter found, no longer bound. Our tongues were touched with her sweet song. And so we cried 1,000 tears.
And that was Refuge on the new album, The Refuge Project by John Paulson, who is here with us in the studio.
Ah, yes.
So this, given this is the namesake of the album, my first question would be, why is it called The Refuge Project?
Well, the inspiration of it came from the, if I could say, the vibe from that was going on during the pandemic. There's especially the first section. It starts out with just the piano and the guitar, and the texture of the piece builds. But so the refuge part of it is the fact that I made repeated trips to the Trempealeau Wildlife Refuge with a buddy of mine who used to be the performance center director at St. Mary's. He's retired now, but he's a painter, lives in Fountain City, and we would meet up, and through all the different seasons, we would venture through the refuge. We were just biking there this week, and then it'll turn into hiking, and then it'll turn into snowshoeing. But it was constant, and he was one of the only people that I could see outside of our home because we both drove separately, and the refuge is just exactly that. It replenished us, emotionally, both of us. And he knows a lot. He's a naturalist, very educated in that area and nature in general. And so I learned a lot from him, and that's where the inspiration for the words in the poem and the text in the music comes from. The second part of it is an African bembe section that when I wrote the first part, the quiet, more meditative part, I had something that I actually played in our church, Central Lutheran Church, with Eric Hoykeshoven on piano, just the two of us. But when you're trying to write for big band, then the next question is, where do you take it from here? And I started with the simple hymn-like tune that morphs, changes, and gets into a more up-tempo 4/4, and then it moves into a jazz waltz in 3/4, and it's kind of a natural segue to do something in 6/8 with a lot of rhythm. So I drew upon the African bembe music. The reason why I came up with that is that I had studied different bembe parts with a guy from Ghana who it was part of his lifeblood. I was my dissertation chair said, Paulson, if you're going to write about jazz on your dissertation, you really need to hook up with Africa. So she hooked me up directly with Kofi, and his wife was a dancer, and he played all the drum parts and things. And so I went back and tried to revisit notes and different ways to notate the bembe parts, and wrote the big band part. The horns are actually playing different drum parts, because in real bembe music there's a myriad of different drums that all have a very specific role. So I assigned different sections in the big band to the different bembe parts, and that led to a lot of complexity. The first draft we tried to record so I could take it to a composer's conference. I spent almost $2,000 getting people to come in and try to record it, and the band couldn't play it. I thought, well, it worked great on the computer. The computer can play it because these notation programs can do practically anything if you get them going in the right direction. But so there was a lot of frustration. Obviously, I was very disappointed, didn't know what to do with it, but I revised it into a more accessible version for the musicians. So there's two versions. The instrumental version on the CD is that's the revised version, and then really I had to change the orchestration completely because I came up with a vocal version. I don't know, it's like Suicide or something. I said, wow, yeah, this isn't complex enough. I'll add voice. And then, I'll think of a poem too, that goes with it. Right. But I have to say that the retired professor, Dr. Rich McDonald from Winona State University, deserves about 50% of the credit because he helped me make the bembe, especially the bembe part of it, feasible. But he also contributed immensely to the mixing and the editing of the record on all the pieces, really. So I owe a huge debt to him for making it work.
Well, he's not the only one who contributed to this. We were talking off the air that you actually had a lot of local performers help you with some of these songs.
Oh, yes. I should have a list in front of me, but on the first song that you played, Blues for SC, the first soloist was wonderful new jazz band director, Aaron Lohmeyer, here at Winona State.
Really?
And he's been in the band now really since he came almost, and it's been a great contributor. And then one of the other soloists on that song is Ray Dretsky. He helped out with the saxophone section when Rich McDonald was here. And on Refuge, both versions, the pianist is Ryan Howe, who was in an improv class here at Winona State when I was teaching here part-time. I think I'm probably forgetting somebody. Larry Price plays on most of my other recordings and things. He couldn't make this last one, but he taught combo here and piano jazz improv. So yeah, there's a lot of and Tom Nally is he plays bass trombone, and he's a professor in the chemistry department.
Here at Winona State.
Yep.
Man, that's crazy to
Probably
think about.
Forgetting somebody else really important too, but
the vocalist?
She's at Viterbo University, Janet Hansen, and obviously has great vocal skills, and I was lucky to have her involved with the recording. We recorded the body of all the different parts the first weekend in March, but we didn't get her on until this summer when we had everything else put together. We could overdub her part.
Well, you did mention how there was a very complex version of this song that you actually couldn't play. And my other question is there anywhere we can hear that more complex version? Because you say you had it running through a computer. I'm so curious to see what that sounded like.
The only place that it exists is a MIDI file, soft synthesizer sounds and things that come off the notation. And no, I didn't take that any farther than the first draft. But yeah, it's Rich McDonald said that given a really good college band or a professional band that wanted to spend the time rehearsing it, that he said, Rich kept saying, John, it's not the music. It's we couldn't play it. We can't play it. It's
right.
They need more. They need more time with it. So it could be done, but
so it's like a little bit of rocket science, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the hard part for the horn players is hearing all the different parts at once and then trying to play their part without getting distracted, because Africans and South American people, when they grow up with these types of rhythms in the street from when they're old enough to hold a bell or hold a drum, it's like second nature to them. But for people who come from the upper Midwest where it's freezing in the winter, it's not something that's second nature.
Well, you definitely gave it a try, which is the next song on our playlist here. This is You Gotta Try on the Refuge Project by John Paulson. Here, give it a listen. and that was You Gotta Try on the Refuge Project, the new album by John Paulson, who's here with us in the studio.
Oh, yeah.
So, my next question here is, when you wrote these songs, what was the process to get from writing these songs to getting it on this album?
Good question. Well, this whole set that's represented on the recording is about a 5 or 6 year project, and this isn't the way that a lot of jazz band directors who write large ensemble music operate, but I like the security of having a core piece to start with. So in jazz, we have this thing called head charts, where you give somebody the music on a piece of paper or 2 pages, and we play off of it, play the melody, and we play the chords. So a lot of the pieces I conceptualize as, I'd say most of them, all of them, because that's the way I operate. Yeah, I'm trying to answer your question. I start with a lead sheet or a head chart, and I like to be able to have played it in public with a small group, quartet or quintet, small group, and then road test it. And then when I know that I've got something to work with, then it becomes a question of expanding it. But
right.
It's a pretty intimidating task to be, even when you've got something to start with, to like I mentioned in the last segment, where are you going to go with it after you do the melody
right.
and the chords and things. So I usually end up going on some pretty diverse journeys with it, and I just try to, like one of my old improv teachers said, you've got to hear the music in your head. Just hear where it's going to go.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I do remember seeing that when I read up on you. You said you learned always struggle to say this, improvisational jazz from some noted teachers in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Who were those noted teachers, and what would you say is the most striking thing you've learned from them that really stuck with you?
Well, it's like so many things. It's like it's a lifelong process, and actually, the first formal studying that I did, music theory, jazz theory, and learning the harmonic aspects of it, and taking an improv class, I was actually a junior in college at the University of Utah, because we didn't have much of a high school program like the way that people do now. They have marvelous things, multiple jazz bands, and some of these schools have jazz improv at the high school level. So I was studying it in the 70s with my jazz band director, Henry Wolking. He wrote for our jazz band. So he was influential in terms of that long term. But so I continued trying to improve myself improvising, but there are so many academic things that I was involved with, both studying to get the advanced degrees, and then teaching full time, and then of course family things. It's something that I would try to get at, but it wasn't really until I was older that I had more time. And then I had a couple sabbaticals from St. Mary's University. They were generous to grant me those, where I studied with various teachers in New York. One, in particular, pianist Gary Dial, who taught at several different big schools like Manhattan School of Music in New York, and the New School. He was adjunct at different places like that, but I went out there for on the sabbatical, but then also I was fortunate to hook up with him when I was out there for the Jazz Educators Conferences for the different times when it was in New York. So I would just bop over to Gary's 44th floor apartment and take a lesson. And then finally he said, why don't we do this by correspondence? So we started sending, of course, technology. In those days, we were sending cassettes back and forth.
Right, right.
And he'd write down some stuff for me to work on, and then I'd record it and send it back, and then he'd give me another batch of stuff so that I could practice it here when I was in Minnesota. But that went on for over a decade. So he was a huge influence on me. And I'd have to say that since I've been retired and when I was teaching part-time, then I had more time to concentrate on it. So that's made a big difference. And hopefully I've gotten a little bit better over the last 30 years. Oh, no, 50 years of working on it.
Well, you mentioned how this improvising has taken you on several journeys. Are there any you'd like to share with us? Any that stuck out?
You mean physically, or
when you're making the music? Like, what do you picture? What is the experience you have when you do this?
You asked how I come up with the music. A lot of times, some of the ideas for this tune, for tunes like the last one in particular, I'll be in my studio at home practicing and getting warmed up or something, and I'll come up with a little lick or a motive idea, and then I have something, and then it kind of dawns on me that, wow, this is kind of interesting. Maybe I could go somewhere with this, so I'll start working on it, and it turns into a composition, and it that becomes a cell that grows from there.
All right, well, why don't we get into another composition of yours? This is Lonely One on the Refuge Project, the new album by John Paulson here at 89.5 KQAL. And that was Lonely One on the Refuge Project by John Paulson, who we have here in the studio with us.
Ah, yes.
So, you've answered this question quite a bit. You told us why where Blues for SC came from, where Refuge comes from, where You Gotta Try comes from. And we have two more songs that we'll be playing, this song, and then we have one more song after this we'll be playing, which is Lonely One and Monkey Bread Blues. Where do those come from?
Well, it's kind of obvious, but I'm not sure the exact date of composition of Lonely One, but it was definitely in the thick of the pandemic. So we all had that vibe going on. So I don't know, I just came up with the melody, and like I was talking about earlier, that I had my tenor saxophone and I was practicing and goofing around. I came up with the first part of it, and then I just went for it. But the second part, which gets a little more upbeat, rocky, or whatever, that's one of those instances where, okay, after you play the main tune, where do you go with it?
Right.
And the chords become more complex then too, and so we were all probably at some point the lonely one during the pandemic.
Yeah, that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah.
Myself included. The pandemic had a really harsh impact on a lot of people, and I think this song reflects people coming out of it. It starts out depressing, and you talk about how it gets all lively and hyped up.
Yeah.
And you see that with people ever since we kind of came out of it. So I think this song is a great representation of that.
Yeah.
And I've noticed a lot of your songs tend to come from some sort of tragedy or some sort of trying to come out of that. Is that the influence for a lot of your music?
Yeah, if you can tap into your heart, your soul, your whatever emotional stuff is happening. Different jazz musicians and blues artists have said, you can't play the blues unless you've lived it, that type of thing. And that's not something for specialized people. Everybody has the down parts, the emotions or whatever.
Right.
One of the ones on my first, I think the first record has the first song that I ever wrote is Cloud Theory, which was it's like Lonely One. It's just kind of dark and it's from that kind of emotion. But that's from 1976.
Well, since you mentioned it, what inspired Cloud Theory? Was there an event that really brought it up, or?
Well, it wasn't anything depressing like what I was talking about. We grew up, our family was big-time boaters, and when we were teenagers, we used to get together with our boats, ski boats and stuff, on the beach, camping out and hanging, swimming, doing everything. And it's kind of stupid, but we got into this thing where, in the summer, the way the thunderstorm can develop really quickly, you can go out at noon and everything is great, and then these things will start moving in. So we would get into a dialogue about, Paulson, what's your cloud theory? Where's the weather going to take us today?
It's just like that old saying in Minnesota: if you want the weather to change, wait 5 minutes. Yeah. Although that cloud theory thing, I know that from my time in Florida. There was an old saying that says, if it's sunny in the morning, it'll be a hurricane by noon. So, I understand that.
There's another interesting aspect about that title is that Adam Meckler, the stellar trumpet flugelhorn player that we feature on this CD project. I think the second to the last record that he put out is when the title of it is When Clouds Look Like This, and the artwork on the cover is kind of like cumulus, beautiful big clouds, but there's a flugelhorn or a trumpet in the middle of the clouds, if you're kind of in the background. Like if you look up in the sky and there's a trumpet, that's the way he sees it.
That's an interesting way to view it. Now, this leads to another question I have for you. Only one of the songs on this album has any lyrics to it, and that's a poem to kind of tell the story of where the song comes from. But all these songs have a story behind them, and they are telling a story without words. Which, do you believe these songs carry the story you're trying to convey, or are you trying to get people to have their own stories from these songs?
Well, both, I think. That's one thing that's I think is really fascinating about instrumental music per se, is that people have their own experiences when they're listening to it, whereas if you're listening to, I love especially 70s acoustic rock, and I love the storytelling in the songs. Jackson Browne and Joni Mitchell, they're way up there, and Joni collaborated with a lot of jazz musicians. But the stories from those songs take you to a certain place, but instrumental music leaves it open, and that's both a blessing and a curse for instrumentalists, because I remember when we were setting up to play with a quartet downtown years ago, Jefferson's, which isn't there anymore, but Paul, the manager, was very into, in fact, he played very into having music, us in there. He played saxophone in college, so he was always open to it. But I remember setting up, and usually it was a family or a group of people sitting at a table, and you kind of had to move things around to set up to play there. And we were setting up next to this family, and there was a little kid there. He's watching us set up, and he watched very intently, but he'd probably never been that close to a band that was going to play live music or a PA system or anything. And I had a PA for the flute and stuff. And when we started playing, I could hear him ask his dad, "Aren't they even going to sing?" It's just stuck in my mind. But I mean, it is like I say, it's a blessing and a curse, instrumental music, because it can take people wherever they want to go with it. But sometimes it's a harder sell than if you have words with it.
You know what? I completely agree. I firmly believe that instrumental music can really help set the scene of even your everyday life. I'll even most of the music I listen to in my headphones is instrumental, just because I'll make completely separate playlist for different settings.
Oh,
I have
really?
one for city and towns, snowfall and ice, deserts, caves and cliffs.
Driving,
yeah. Driving.
Working out,
Yep.
Yeah,
I have one for academia. I have one for places that are arcane and otherworldly. So I completely understand the idea of using instrumental music to really try and get people to have their own story and relate to it in different ways.
Yeah.
And, I just got to say I completely agree. But why don't we get into our final song here? This will be Monkey Bread Blues on the Refuge Project, the new album by John Paulson, here at 89.5 KQAL. And that was Monkey Bread Blues, a song on the new album The Refuge Project by John Paulson, who is here with us in the studio.
Yep.
So we were talking about this off the air. You mentioned how the song came to an end, and two of the people you were working with just started playing their trumpets and almost having a conversation with that. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for our audience?
Yeah, you mean the dialogue between the trumpet and the drums?
Yeah.
Is that what yeah. Okay. So it's Adam Meckler, the star trumpet and flugelhorn player that we brought in, especially for the recording, and wouldn't have been able to do it without, of course, the help from the Minnesota State Arts Board and the grant that we got to support the recording of the CD and the concert in January that we're going to do at Mayo in support of the CD. But Meckler then he's talking back and forth to the drums at the end of Monkey Bread Blues, where he's using the toilet plunger mute. It's not just shaped like one. It is a toilet plunger without the wooden handle, and you can literally make it talk. And then of course he gets into all the growling and stuff that's Bubber Miley in Duke Ellington's band was one of the first guys to start that, and goes back at least that far, if not farther. And that's just a riot. What he got into in that exchange at the end.
Well, let's talk about that concert a little more you mentioned. So this concert that's happening on January 20th, 2024. Can you go into a little bit of detail about that?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning it. That's actually the second time that we're going to play at Mayo High School. And the fun thing about that is I think we were there, I think it was 2019 with Adam Meckler. He's not going to be there January 20th when we're there this year, but that was fun because that was 50 years since I graduated from that music department. And they have a really good jazz band, and they're studying improv and stuff, and they have combos and things going. So that's fun to be back there again in January. But before that, we're going to be at Wellington's here in Winona this Saturday, 11/11.
Yep, November 11th, 2024.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and it says here this is the Jazz for Vets. Can you go in a little more detail about that?
You said 2024, but actually it's this Saturday.
I'm sorry, 2023.
Yeah. That's all right. Thanks for mentioning it. No, it's 7 o'clock this Saturday, 11/11, Veterans Day, and it's a fundraiser at Wellington's in Winona for. I'm targeting homeless vets, specifically in southeastern Minnesota, and working with an organization called MACV, which has, I think, 12 or 15 different offices all around the state. And they said that I could target the money specifically for Winona area counties, Winona County and Houston County, and so bring it home. And the GoFundMe site is I tried to keep it simple so people could remember it and contribute profusely. It's just called Jazz for Vets at GoFundMe. And if you forget about that, it's all up on my website at paulsonjazz.com.
Well, I guess my last question here would be: is there anything you'd like to share with our audience before we end the show?
No, except that I would love to say a huge thank you to KQAL for playing not only my music, but music representing so many different creative artists in our region. It's really, I've been really thankful for that coverage. And lastly, I would just mention that if you've enjoyed the music that's been played on this show, we're going to play all the music from the CD live this Saturday at Wellington's.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for being on the sound with us, John Paulson.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, to hear more of John Paulson's work or to find where you can stream the Refuge Project, check out his website, paulsonjazz.com, or order a physical copy from Monumentus Records at monumentusrecords.com. Or you can request a song here at 89.5 KQAL. This has been The Sound, and we've been joined by the local artist John Paulson. The Sound is made possible by a grant from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. I'm Giovanni Bermudez.
Yay.
Thanks for listening to The Sound. The Sound is produced by KQAL-FM on the campus of Winona State University. Visit us online at kqal.org. Theme music for The Sound provided by Mike Terrell of Fires of Denmark.